For centuries, we believed the Vikings survived winter through brute strength and heavy layers of animal hide, as if they walked through blizzards powered only by will. But a thin layer of archaeological dust brushed away at Borg, Hofstadr, and Gedevi has quietly shattered that idea. Beneath floors buried under ice for 1,000 years, researchers found layers of soil, ash, and paja arranged with such precision that they could not possibly be accidental. Those materials trapped heat, breathed, and reacted to fire like a fully formed technical system, a nameless science built from the memory of countless winters that nearly claimed entire communities. There is no doubt anymore. The Vikings were not just warriors. They were engineers of the cold. They watched the soil crack, the steam rise, the wind slip through the floorboards, and turned every small observation into a survival principle.
Yes, I agree.
What astonished archaeologists was not the structure's accuracy, but how it carried both human fear and human hope. The fire dying at midnight, the warmth sinking into the floor, and each layer of ash-earth argilla silently holding on to the last scraps of heat so a family could wake up alive the next morning.
Are you sure you're
If you've ever thought winter was just a backdrop, these discoveries will make you rethink the entire Viking world. And if you want to dive deeper into the secrets that the ice once buried, keep watching, because what comes next is far more surprising. When archaeologists peeled back each layer of soil at Borg and Hofstadr, they didn't just uncover traces of daily life. They saw an entire thermal system sleeping beneath their feet. Paja lay at the bottom, creating tiny air chambers like lungs. Above it sat a fine gray layer of ash that absorbed moisture and stabilized temperature. And finally, a compressed layer of argilla sealed everything like a biological lid that locked the heat inside. Those 3 layers were not the result of convenience, but the outcome of generations watching fires fade, floors go cold, and elders shiver through the night. The climax of the discovery lies here. When the central fire in the longhouse burned out completely, the warmth didn't vanish. It sank into the ground, gathered in the paja, moved through the ash, and was returned slowly by the argilla throughout the night. It breathed, expanded, and left thermal microfractures still visible to modern eyes. These are the physical traces of a mechanism that kept entire communities alive for centuries. With every step placed on that warm floor, the Vikings knew they were standing on the very boundary between life and the ruthless winter. And that floor, seemingly silent, was the most loyal ally they ever had. When archaeologists dug deeper into the soil at Hofstadr, they thought they would find simple traces of daily life. A few burnt wool fibers, some scattered ash, a couple of small footprints. But the more they observed, the more they realized something chilling. That floor didn't just preserve memories. It told the story of a silent war, harsher than any battle the Vikings ever faced. The children's footprints pressed into the argilla were still perfectly shaped, as if they had just run toward the hearth, searching for the last bit of warmth. The half-burnt wool fragments, once licked by the flames, showed that someone had tried to keep them close to the fire, long enough to dry during a stormy night. The dark patches of animal fat soaked into the soil weren't leftovers from a meal, but the traces of a desperate effort, sealing every crack so the wind wouldn't kill the elders before dawn. The twist came when specialists noticed something unusual. In some houses, the ash layer had been disturbed, as if the family had frantically churned the floor in the middle of the night, sensing it cooling too fast. These were no longer signs of daily life. They were moments of panic when an entire household fought for every breath of warmth. And it's those tiny, almost invisible details that reveal a far bigger truth. The Vikings didn't live in romantic strength. They lived with the constant fear that one long night of cold could erase an entire lineage. If you noticed how those footprints tell a story completely different from what the books say, leave a comment below, because sometimes the smallest details carry the biggest secrets of the past. While most of medieval Europe shivered inside thin wooden houses where wind slipped in from every direction and the cold squeezed the lungs each night, the Vikings of the north entered winter as if they were sheltering inside a living creature. Their houses didn't stand still. They breathed, held heat, stored warmth, and returned life to the people inside. What astonished researchers was the absolute contrast between the two worlds. On the same stormy night, European homes could freeze an elderly person within hours, while a Viking longhouse still kept enough warmth for children to sleep peacefully on animal skins. The secret lay in how they treated architecture like a body. Small openings were angled toward the winter sun. Thick turf walls absorbed heat and released it slowly, and the three-layered earth floor held warmth like a thermal stomach. All of it worked together like a complete circulatory system. The harder the wind roared outside, the stronger the convection inside pushed warmth along the length of the house like blood moving through veins. The climax came when archaeologists compared heat loss. A European house lost nearly all its warmth in just 90 minutes, while a Viking longhouse retained heat for hours, even after the fire had died. They needed no alchemy or miracles, only a deeper understanding of wind, earth, and light than their contemporaries. That house, with every detail seemingly simple, was the silent weapon that helped the Vikings survive. A cold, powerful enough to wipe out an entire civilization. When the archaeological team lifted the layer of ash at Jedevi and Kaupang, they didn't just find the familiar ring of hearthstones. They stumbled upon a paradox. Many stones lay outside the reach of the flames, yet were blackened and split open from thermal shock. That wrong placement was the real clue. The Vikings had deliberately positioned blocks of basalt, granite, and sandstone in optimal heat absorption zones, so they would warm gradually in cycles and store heat like an ancient battery. The climax came when modern simulations revealed this. After the fire went out, these stones continued radiating warmth for hours, keeping the longhouse temperature more stable than any natural insulation of the era. They cracked not because the flames abused them, but because they had endured thousands of cycles of contraction and expansion. Evidence of a technology used continuously over many winters. Even more astonishing is that this technique wasn't limited to the longhouse. On winter sea voyages, Viking sailors heated stones until they glowed red, wrapped them in damp hide, and placed them beneath the benches. Without burning extra wood, they created a portable heat source inside a sealed boat crossing a frozen ocean. This wasn't superstition or wild instinct. It was experiential science, precise and repeatable. Those cracked stones, it turns out, are the physical proof of an energy system a full millennium ahead of the modern world. In the middle of the northern winter, where the sea is black as a giant fissure and the wind cuts sharp like metal, no one survived on a Viking ship through strength alone. What kept those sailors from freezing to death wasn't clothing or a fire. It was the silent stones beneath their seats, the very things archaeologists only understood centuries later. The Vikings heated basalt and granite until they glowed red like the heartbeat of a breathing beast, then wrapped them in damp hide or thick wool before placing them in the boat. As the hide steamed, warmth spread through the enclosed space, creating a small heat refuge that was just enough to keep the crew alive through a stormy night. What's even more astonishing is that these stones weren't kept by the fire. They were heated separately, almost like an ancient ritual, passed only among those who held the oars. But along with this brilliant technique came a real danger. A flawed stone, or one placed incorrectly, could shatter suddenly, releasing steam and snuffing out the fire instantly. In the darkness, over a frozen ocean, losing heat meant a death sentence. Some sagas tell of ships that vanished after a single windy night, and many specialists believe the cause wasn't the storm, but a stone breaking at the wrong moment. A few captains even believed in guardian stones, carrying a single piece passed down through their family, because they felt a stone that had grown accustomed to the fire would not betray them during the long night. If you've ever heard stories about strange rituals aboard Viking ships, leave a comment, because you might hold a piece of the puzzle archaeology is still searching for. In popular memory, the Vikings appear wrapped in heavy furs, as if they simply threw thick animal hides over their shoulders to fight the blizzards. But what archaeology has uncovered at Birka, Oseberg, and Jedevi tells a completely different story. They weren't wearing clothes. They were wearing a sophisticated thermal device, woven fiber by fiber from generations of survival experience. The climax of the discovery lies in the double twist SZ technique, which created tiny air chambers that held heat like a biological buffer. Combined with the dual coat sheep breed, soft underwool, and an outer layer rich in lanolin for moisture resistance, Viking clothing functioned like a temperature-regulating machine, light but waterproof, thick but never suffocating. On the surface of the wool fibers, the Vikings even applied a thin layer of animal fat, forming a natural wind barrier. With its 3 functional layers, absorb, retain heat, block wind, Viking clothing achieved efficiency close to modern layering systems, even though they knew nothing of scientific formulas. The real twist emerged when modern tests on reconstructed garments showed that with this clothing alone, Vikings could row for hours in sub-zero winds while maintaining stable body temperature. Without a fire, they carried a heater on their own bodies. If you think ancient clothing was just something to wear, try leaving a comment below. How many more hidden technologies do you think still lie inside fabrics that history hasn't fully revealed? While most of Europe still lit fires as a simple instinct, in the north, the Vikings were doing something modern science needed a millennium to name. They were directing heat beneath their feet. Excavations in Norway and Ribe show that under every hearth was a multi-layered structure: charcoal, stone, sand, and a tightly packed layer of argilla on top. These layers didn't just withstand heat, they coordinated it, letting warmth seep through the ground like a hidden current. The climax came when specialists tried to recreate the system. After hours of burning, even when the embers had died, the floor continued releasing steady heat, enough to keep children and elders from freezing to death through the night. The efficiency shocked many researchers. The Viking home, seemingly simple, turned out to function like a semi-underground heating furnace, an early version of radiant floors that the modern world now praises. And the most beautiful part? There were no blueprints, no written theories, only the patient observation of people who understood that if heat wasn't preserved, the cold would take what mattered most. If you think technology only comes from laboratories, try leaving a comment. Do you think our ancestors were far ahead of their time? In medieval records, Europeans often saw themselves as the center of civilization, while the North was portrayed as a land of wild warriors. But 21st century archaeology has flipped the script. It was the Vikings who understood climate better than any civilization of their era. And that truth, spoken plainly, feels like a slap to medieval Europe's pride. A world where a single cold night could freeze an entire family inside their own home. The drama of the discovery lies in that brutal contrast. While European houses bled heat through every wooden seam, the Viking longhouse operated like a miniature nation, where every layer of turf, every beam, every ventilation hole played a part in keeping people alive. They oriented their homes toward the low winter sun. They created natural convection inside the roof. They built walls thick as fortresses to trap warmth. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a technical manifesto in an age still blind to climate. The biggest political flex is this. When a harsh winter swept across northern Europe, European households prayed. Viking households prepared to survive. That difference alone led many experts to conclude the Vikings didn't endure winter. They managed it. They didn't avoid the cold. They turned it into something that had to respect them. And once you understand that, every longhouse stops being just a shelter. It becomes a declaration of power from a people who survived through intellect. Imagine stepping out of a longhouse on a winter morning where your breath freezes the moment it leaves your lips. In that instant, you would understand why the Vikings believed there was a kind of fire that didn't live in the hearth, in the stones, or beneath the floor, but inside their own bodies. And to keep that fire from dying, they relied on a nutritional strategy so harsh that modern people shiver just hearing about it. The climax of the secret lies in the analysis of Viking bones from Ribe and Trondheim. A diet rich in whale fat, seal fat, deep-sea fish, and smoked meat wasn't a preference. It was a natural thermogenesis system, keeping the body warm even when the wind cut the skin like a blade. In their kitchens, melted fat-coated pottery and created a heat-resistant shield. In their bodies, that same fat kept life from being strangled by winter. The Vikings treated eating together as a sacred ritual. Warmth rising from thick soup, the sound of children laughing, hands passing around smoked fish, all of it merging into a communal fire. A household could grow cold from a lack of wood, but if they lacked sharing, they believed the spiritual flame would be the first to go out. The lesson is simple, yet profound. Warmth doesn't come only from fire. It comes from the way people protect one another. If you feel that every Viking detail opens a new window into human endurance, leave a comment below and share which part impressed you the most. And if you want to continue exploring the survival secrets buried by time, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any story waiting to be reignited.